Afternoon, everyone. I'm Lorna Ritchie, Director of Public Affairs at the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the session on delivering integrity to the voluntary carbon market and what it means for investors and corporates. So we have about an hour. The first 25 minutes we have for the panel, and then I really want to make sure that we have time for questions and a discussion from the audience. So please, those of you who are watching, please do put your questions in the chat and we will come to you at the end. So I'm joined today by Jasna Seely, Senior Specialist from Climate Action 100, Hans Men, Partner at Generation Investment Management, Anton Svetov, Associate Director of Policy at ICVCM, Raffaele Infanti, Engagement Manager at VCMI, and Sam Israeli, Partner and Chief Sustainability Officer at Bain & Company. So turning to Jasna first to set the scene, would you be able to talk us through the work of Climate Action 100 and what you've been doing around the net zero company benchmark?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Lorna, and hi, everyone. As Lorna mentioned, my name is Jasna Seely, and I'm a Senior Specialist for Climate Action 100+ at the Principles for Responsible Investment. In speaking today, it's important to clarify that I do not represent the views or positions of the hundreds of investors who participate in Climate Action 100+, either individually or collectively. But to give a bit more background on Climate Action 100+, launched in 2017, it's the world's largest investor-led initiative, focused on engaging 170 of the largest corporate greenhouse gas emitters to reduce emissions, improve governance, and strengthen climate-related financial disclosures. Coordinated by 5 member networks, Climate Action 100+ supports investor signatories in their corporate stewardship activities to create long-term shareholder value. It's a foundational principle of the initiative that investors are independent fiduciaries, responsible for their own investment and voting decisions, and must always act completely independently to set their own strategies, policies, and practices based on their own best interests. The use of engagement tools and tactics, including the scope of participation in Climate Action 100+ engagements, are at the discretion of each individual engager. How investors choose to manage climate risk and set their individual strategies, policies, and practices, and their Climate Action 100+ related activity is for them to decide. One of the initiative's flagship projects is the Net Zero Company Benchmark, which assesses the performance of companies engaged by investors through Climate Action 100+ on their net zero transition. The benchmark's assessed by our research partners Transition Pathway Initiative Center, Carbon Tracker, the Rocky Mountain Institute, and Influence Map, and it's widely used by investors to ascertain the progress companies are making towards the net zero transition and aligning with the goals of the Paris Agreement. The latest round of our benchmark results, released last October, showed that more companies than ever are setting out the actions they will take to decarbonize, but most fail to quantify how these actions will contribute to their emissions reduction targets. 59% of the 150 companies assessed last year disclosed the actions that they are taking to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, a significant increase of 7 percentage points compared to 2022. However, only 21% of companies assessed quantified the proportion of their targeted emissions reductions that will be addressed through these actions. As of last year, we also added 2 new metrics related to corporate disclosures on carbon credits to the Net Zero Company Benchmark Disclosure Framework assessments, which are evaluated by our research partners Transition Pathway Initiative Center. The first new metric assesses whether companies disclose the quantity, type, and certification of any carbon offsets or negative emissions technologies they are using. And the second new metric evaluates whether focus companies disclose the type, quantity, and vintage of carbon credits retired in the previous year. Importantly, it should be noted that Climate Action 100+ does not have a position on carbon offsets, so these metrics should not be construed as endorsing or promoting the use of offsets or negative emissions technologies in corporate decarbonization strategies. They merely evaluate whether company disclosures on offsets are comprehensive and robust enough to support investor engagement. Companies are encouraged to be transparent about how they use offsets and to clearly delineate between their own emissions reduction efforts and the emission reductions delivered through offsets, in order to help investors better understand their net zero transition planning. So what do last year's results in this area show? The 2023 benchmark found that corporate disclosures on carbon offsets are lacking, only roughly 3% or 4 Climate Action 100+ focused companies were found to disclose sufficient details on how they're using offsets and negative emissions technologies in order to meet their greenhouse gas reduction targets. Furthermore, the results from a new metric evaluating carbon credit retirement showed that only 9% of companies assessed had disclosed sufficient details on carbon credits retired in the previous year. These results indicate that corporate transparency in this area needs to rapidly increase in order for investors to be able to better understand the credibility of corporate transition plans and the transition risks of their investments. Given the current lack of corporate transparency in this area, as highlighted by the Climate Action 100+ benchmark results, it's helpful that initiatives like VCMI and ICVCM are providing clearer guidance to the market through mechanisms such as the Claims Code of Practice. And on that note, I look forward to hearing more about your work in today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasna, for talking through your experience of working on the benchmark framework. And it's really interesting to hear what you're saying there about transparency. I think that's going to be a theme of many of the panelists' discussion. But Hans, I would just like to turn to you next. Could you talk a bit about your work at Generation Investment Management, and what advice would you give to investors, and why should investors be looking at high integrity voluntary carbon markets?
Great. Thank you, Lorna, and thank you for having us today. This feels like an important discussion and very timely, frankly. Also, in light of some of the developments recently with SBTI and others, this is a very important topic. We do believe that carbon markets, both regulated and voluntary, can play an important role in net zero transition plans. So that, just to say that very clearly. What I'd like to do is make 3 points for this conversation, and we'll look forward to Q&A as well. The first is really that a just transition to net zero is not easy. I think we all know and increasingly realize this is in fact the challenge of our time. That's in no way to back away from the urgency or the requirement to get to net zero, but it's also quite important to acknowledge the degree of difficulty that we're working with here. And that particularly as we think about emissions and go, into scope 3, it's critical that we do use science to inform ourselves and how we think about this, but also to recognize that assigning responsibility, again, particularly in scope 3, does have an element of nuance or art as well as precision associated to it. So that's just important. This is hard. It's not completely easy to understand where responsibility begins and ends. And frankly, sector context matters quite a lot as well in terms of what different sectors and companies should be focused on. So 1, transition to net zero, a just transition is not easy. Secondly, we feel it's critical that we all need to be clear-eyed about what carbon markets can and cannot do in the context of net zero transition plans. So carbon markets or offsets cannot replace or distract from a focus on significant emissions reductions. We all know it's 90% plus emissions reductions that we need to achieve. They also can't enable a shortcut to making net zero claims. This is not a magical shortcut to getting to the solution, but can play an important role along the way. And indeed, one of the things that carbon markets and carbon offsets can and must do is provide a way to counterbalance unavoidable emissions when we get to the net zero state. Of course, they can also help significantly reduce the cumulative emissions along the way. So responsible use and a credible use of carbon markets can be a valuable part of a strong transition and just transition to net zero. The final point I'd make that I think we're all touching on is that the quality of credits and indeed claims, and also the transparency, as Jasna said, is not there today. We just really need to acknowledge that we're not there. It's disappointing where we are, but it does feel like it's coming. And to Jasna's point, the formation of ICVCM and VCMI, we feel are very important initiatives to defining quality and integrity, both in what is a carbon credit and what are appropriate claims to make in which circumstances. Standard setters in our view have a really crucial role to play in establishing guidelines. So what does that mean? Where do we go from here? I guess what we would like to put forward in the conversation is that the investment community definitely needs to continue and indeed redouble efforts to support and encourage companies to make a just transition to net zero. We think it's important to realize that voluntary carbon markets are crucial to support the development of long duration removals that will be critical in a net zero end state. That they're also very valuable in the context of the time value of carbon. We know that it not only matters what we are or when we get to net zero, but also how much cumulative emissions we have along the way. So we can't cut corners, no question about that, but neither can we let perfection be the enemy of progress in getting to where we need to get to. And we really would like to see everyone supporting standard setters in establishing robust guidelines that we can all get around for quality and transparency, and that includes ICVCM and VCMI. We'd also like to encourage people to encourage SBTI to weigh in on this subject. This is an important moment for them, and they are opening a consultation and requesting feedback, so we would encourage folks to provide that feedback. But I'll leave it at there. Look forward to questions then later on.
Thanks, Hans. I think that's a really helpful segue to Anton. If it's really exciting time, as Hans has mentioned, the quality of claims and credits hasn't historically been there, but the ICVCM at the moment is going through the assessment process. It's in full swing, 5 programs. What does this mean for corporates and investors, and what is the role of high integrity carbon credits in reaching net zero?
Thank you very much, Lorna, and it's really a pleasure to be here and to share these points with you today. So we believe that we're really, in a situation where we need every tool available to reduce emission, and investing in these high integrity credits in the high integrity VCM is really an important and complementary tool for companies that will allow them to do more alongside the deep reductions that are needed within the companies themselves. Now, these high integrity VCMs are really an instrument to help fund climate projects and activities and mitigation activities, climate action that would not otherwise be viable, and help bring private finance to developing countries. So what we have done at the ICVCM is we have brought the first global benchmark for high integrity credits to the market on the supply side. We're operating in a manner similar to how financial regulator would operate. So essentially setting rules related to a product, in this case, carbon credits, and to the carbon credit programs that issue them. We've gone through a rigorous process of public consultation to come up with the rule book for what we believe and what the market is coming around believing is currently the threshold for high integrity on the market. Now, it's pragmatic rulebook that is now being applied to programs and what we call carbon credit categories, so essentially groups of methodologies. And we are deep in the weeds, as you mentioned, of the assessment process. We have announced the first decisions on the first 5 carbon crediting programs. And just to clarify that, so we use what we call a double tick system. So in order for a group of carbon credits to be labeled as CCP eligible, so eligible for the Core Carbon Principles label, these credits have to be issued under a CCP eligible methodology, and they have to be issued by a CCP eligible program. So we now have a set of these first ticks, so we now need some more of the second type of ticks, and then we will have CCP eligible credits in the market. Now on the program level, and I'm sure that the group is familiar with the broad the broad moniker of integrity and quality. This includes issues like additionality, quantification, protection against leakage, governance of the programs themselves, and of course, sustainable development benefits and safeguards. But what the ICVCM framework does is really it creates a robust and very concrete understanding of what that is at a program and at a carbon credit level. So we're now bringing that to the market, and we hope that this is going to be an exciting several months to come, when we will be seeing the labels actually arrive to the market. And what this will do is this will bring trust. It will allow demand to mobilize around these high integrity credits and essentially create a premium on them. So, and we can talk more about the Q&A. I will stop here.
Thanks, Anton. Raffaele, just so we've heard from Anton about the standards that are being developed for the credits themselves. Could you talk a bit about the work of the VCMI, the work that you're doing around the claims code, and how that gives companies a framework for high integrity claims, and what are the benefits for companies from doing this?
Who we are. VCMI is an international non-profit that was brought together in the run-up to COP26. We do enable high integrity voluntary carbon markets to contribute to the goal of the Paris Agreement, making sure that the VCMs bring benefits for people and the planet. And our mission is really to accelerate this transition to ambitious and economy-wide climate policies and regulation. Last year, at the end of last year, we released the Claims Code of Practice. The Claims Code provides standards on how companies can transparently and credibly use high-quality carbon credits, and how they would do that as part of their decarbonization strategies beyond their direct reductions, and how to make sure that these claims demonstrate climate leadership. We can dismantle a bit these topics, but I just wanted to emphasize again the transparency and credibility, which you heard already about from other panelists, and that are really at the core of the Claims Code of Practice and what VCMI does. We developed the Claims Code through an 18-month collaborative process leading up to the latest release. In November 2023, we engaged with about 150 total stakeholders across private, public, and nonprofit sectors. At the end of last year, we had about 11 companies that were part of our early adopters program. We also had about 70 experts in our stakeholder forum, about 20 members of our expert advisory group, and we are engaging with more than 55 governments that are part of our country contact group. So multi-stakeholder engagement is really at the core of everything we do. And we want to continue this engagement to ensure that our guidance it is really robust, and that we go through this robust process of engaging with different stakeholders. So now companies can make carbon integrity claims as of the release of the Claims Code of Practice last year. And these claims are the first third-party verified claims about the use that a company can make of carbon credits. And again, the goal is so that companies can demonstrate climate achievement in a way that is credible and transparent. And I'm really happy that today we have Sam from Bain & Company who can talk more about making a carbon integrity claim. Bain & Company was a part of the early adopters program last year and went on to become the first company to make a VCMI carbon integrity claim. And specifically, they made a carbon integrity platinum claim, which is the highest VCMI claim that demonstrates this climate leadership. And we're really proud of these achievements that sets really a precedent for wider adoption. And we hope it will inspire other companies to engage with high integrity voluntary carbon markets with transparency and accountability that are built into the system. So just to expand a little bit on the Claims Code of Practice, and then we can follow on with the Q&A.
I just wanted to clarify the role of VCMI's claims code of practice in terms of ensuring integrity on the demand side. You just heard from ICVCM about the core carbon principles and how they ensure integrity on the supply side, meaning that carbon credits represent real, verified greenhouse gas emissions reductions and removals, and that apply robust environmental and social safeguards. On our side, the VCMI's claims code is the industry-leading guidance for companies on credible claims. And what is important within the claims code is that it incorporates other standards, including the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, SBTi, CDP, and of course, ICVCM. VCMI is working really hand in glove with fellow standard setters, including the ones that I've just mentioned, to make sure that we do deliver some clear and cohesive standards for corporate climate action, and that it is clear for companies what is the pathway to decarbonization and how to use carbon credits in a credible way. We also believe that the frameworks developed by VCMI and ICVCM are really important as a foundation for regulators and policymakers so that they can build on the frameworks that we have been working on and fast track the development of new rules to build market confidence and drive more demand, so that at the end we get more finance flowing faster to where it's needed the most to drive down emissions. So the claims code provides this framework for policymakers across different regions, and it helps scale carbon markets in a way that is effective, that it is harmonized, and that maintains high integrity in the markets to drive at the end buyers confidence. So to summarize, the aim of the claims code is really to bring that confidence and credibility to companies that want to engage with VCMs. And the carbon integrity claims are now available for companies to be made as the first third-party verified claims, as I said. There's a monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework that we have built and that companies can follow to really look at all the requirements in the 4 steps process that I'm not going into today. But everything is available on our website. You can find more on our page on how to make a claim, and also find more information on the webinar series that we have recently launched. If you're interested more into a deep dive and more details on how to make a claim, you can look up our Carbon Integrity 101 webinar series for more step-by-step guide on how to make a claim.
Thanks, Raffaele. Thanks so much for talking about the work that you're doing on the claims code, and also the role that is interesting what you're saying there about the role that the VCMI claims code can play in supporting market regulators, and also emphasising again the importance of transparency. So Sam, Bain, as Raffaele was saying, was the first company to make a high integrity claim under VCMI. So could you talk to us a bit about how that fits in with your decarbonisation strategy? How did you come to that point where you decided to make the claim and use the VCMI claims code?
As we were said during the introductions, my name is Sam Israel. I'm a partner and the Chief Sustainability Officer at Bain & Company. And I'm really excited to share a few words about just how and why we decided to become the first company to make a platinum VCMI claim. It goes back. Bain has a long history of climate action. We've built our program over the past several years. It's something our clients and our employees are demanding. They want bold actions, they want meaningful reductions, and they want us to set ambitious targets. Just as examples, we were the first of the professional services firms to go, one of the first of the professional services firms to go carbon neutral back in 2011 when we set our first targets. And then in 2022, we committed to being carbon net negative. We've got both short and long-term SBTi approved targets. We've published our climate transition plan, and we have a long-term net zero strategy that's been approved by SBTi. We've taken the steps to make sure that our greenhouse gas inventory is assured by an external third party, And we do extensive public disclosures to organizations like GRI, EcoVadis, CDP, UNGC, and others. As others have said, I mean, first we should prioritize thinking about how do we actually abate emissions. And we have a very active set of initiatives to reduce our scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions significantly. Yet, we do believe that a beyond value chain mitigation strategy is important, and it should be last but not later, right? I mean, we shouldn't wait until 2049 to start taking carbon out of the atmosphere and using some of these tools that are available to us. Why wait to make sure that we can actually achieve the goal and impact the climate? So it was a pretty easy decision for us to go through the VCMI process. And the process itself was actually a very helpful exercise. It helped us to really bring rigor into our sourcing processes and helped us understand the true quality of our offsets and making sure that our investments do have a real impact. It helped us to have evidence that we can share with our clients and our employees about the progress we're making and some of the things we're doing. And I think it's important to note, we had a lot of these processes in place already that we've built up over time as part of our program. The changes for us really that we had to make were really around our reporting to make sure that we had the proper documentation to support the claim we were making. One side note about this is that, despite the fact that VCMI claims accept carbon credits from projects that are either reductions or removals, we committed to meet our platinum claim entirely through removals. Primarily, this is a risk mitigation strategy for us. Carbon avoidance and reduction projects are really important and can play a key role in a company's offset strategy, but they also have challenges and, things around additionality and verification that we just aren't willing to manage. And so for that reason, we use removals only. I think it's important to note that the use of the code is really not only about ensuring the credits you buy are high quality, but also ensuring that the credits are used as part of a robust and holistic sustainability program. It needs to include detailed measurement, kind of meaningful reductions, and transparent reporting. It's important to remember high integrity is not a synonym for high quality. While additionality and permanence and overcrediting are important, or avoiding those are important, you also need traceability and accountability for how they are used and ensure that you have a robust audit trail. One of the things that I get asked a lot is, what's the ROI for this? Why would we make this kind of an investment? And though it's admittedly hard to quantify specifically, there are really 3 main benefits we achieve from making these investments. The first is from our clients, who increasingly expect us to reduce the emissions related to the services we provide. As an example, the number of clients who request sustainability information from us during RFPs has actually more than doubled in the last 12 months. And a significant number of our top clients have requested case-specific emissions reporting for their use. The second benefit area is really in our employees, and they expect us to do our part to mitigate the climate impact of our work, and they want us to be good corporate citizens of the planet. And the last benefit is really to our brand, where we want to demonstrate meaningful differentiate from our competitors. It's not just about splashy press releases or throwing money at cool technologies. We have to stay ahead of the industry on decarbonizing and minimizing our impact on the environment. The impact really matters. And so for those of you who are investors, there are 3 things I'd kind of suggest you should be asking. The first is, ask, is the company engaging its stakeholders to help with their sustainability needs, right? Their ESG strategy really needs to be grounded by stakeholder expectations in order to take advantage of the market opportunities. So there's as much opportunity and growth as there is in, thinking about kind of the costs and decarbonization itself. This is not just about cost, it's about risk management. It's about positioning the company as a leader. Second question you may want to ask is the company investing in a program that will drive real lasting reductions in their carbon emissions? You have to pressure test to say, are the things they claim they're doing, are they actually going to have an impact? It's helpful to use third-party ratings on some of these. If the company reports to CDP or EcoVadis or others like that, it's a good way to get an assessment of what they're doing. Third, the last question I'd ask is, are they really being transparent in their reporting, right? Do they share are they reporting to someone like a CDP or an EcoVadis and making those public? Are they talking about the progress they're making? They need to be very clear about the commitments they've made and the progress they're making towards those. So those are kind of the three questions we would typically ask of investors or as investors in companies. I'll wrap. We're really excited about making the first platinum VCMI claim, and we hope that others are inspired by this and join us in making claims in the future. We believe the code is consistent with best practice for high integrity use of credits, and we think it's essential that if we are going to bring discipline and rigor to the carbon markets and attract the financing necessary to support the projects that we need to address the challenges that are facing the planet. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. That's so interesting to hear firsthand your experience as an investor and what you look for in particular. So thank you to all of our panelists for kicking off this discussion. So I want this to be the start of the discussion. So I encourage everyone to both ask questions in the question box, but also share your experience as well. We're very interested to hear more from all of you. So we've heard from panelists about importance of a holistic decarbonisation strategy underpinning the use of high integrity credits, that transparency is important at all stages. Sam, you particularly emphasised the importance of stakeholder input and also the need for a global standard for carbon markets and claims. So I will kick off the questions we have in the chat. So I've got a couple on the core carbon principles, which I'll group together for Anton. So what is the timeline for creating CCP labels for all categories? And please confirm if the CCP labels for all methodology versions or just the recent ones. And then another one on CCPs is there a study being done on how will the market perceive the disparity between CCP label credits and non-labeled ones? I'll let you kick off, Anton.
Easy questions. Thanks for these. These are some of the questions we get a lot, and they are, of course, I'm being humorous here. They are not easy. On the timeline, this is it's important for the market to understand how this is unfolding, and I just want to say from the outset that the way we're approaching this and the way decisions are going to on categories and on methodologies are going to come out is not a reflection of the integrity of the credits itself, right? So it has to do with the process of assessment and how that is set out. And we're also not specifically targeting any share of the market. So there is no, this is something that we are not specifically using as a target for our work. We are assessing the methodologies that were submitted to us by the programs that applied for the CCP label. And I would invite interested participants to take a look at the relevant section of our website where we have the timeline for where each methodology and program is in the process of assessment. Now, important thing to note is that when programs apply for the label, they can exclude some methodologies from assessment, and that is taking up a certain section of the market. So programs may wish to not submit methodologies for assessment, and we are going to see these decisions coming out monthly from ICVCM work, from board meetings that makes decisions on the assessment, and hopefully over the next several months these are going to be coming out, and we are going to see more and more category level decisions in the coming months. So and on the versions, again, it's really how programs submit those categories for assessment, and we are assessing them. It really depends on the methodologies, and I would invite maybe we could share with the participants all the relevant links to the right places to find, and you could take a look at the methodology or the type of projects you're particularly interested in, see where those are in a given process. And on the second question on the difference, sort of differential between an ultimate market where we have CCP labeled and non-CCP labeled credits. Now, again, we are not seeking to prevent non-labeled credits to be traded in the market. What we know for sure is that there is definitely demand and higher expectations from high integrity credits, and we expect CCP labeled credits to be priced at a premium. We will leave to the market to determine that and to work with that, but and the transparency with which we approach communicating our framework and the decisions we are making will hopefully allow the market to define what that premium could be. So it's the work we're doing is really designed to try and make it easier for buyers to market participants to recognize what is a high integrity credit. So I wouldn't go as far to make any claims on specific differentials, but we hope there is going to be one. That's just because the market has been waiting for a threshold for high integrity credits. Thanks.
Thanks, Anton. And we have a couple of questions which I'll group around investors. So Hans in particular, but Sam, you might also like to come back on this one. There's a question around what, in your experience, is holding investors back from investing, and how would you go about addressing these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add to that, it's sort of what's holding investors back from investing, but what is creating challenges in this marketplace. And I think I'd go a little bit deeper into two aspects. One, what we've seen is that, journalists in particular have rightly called out and pointed out some of the integrity challenges with both credits and claims. And that's very significant. And I know there are those out there who feel that decarbonization is the only thing, and there should be no credits, and so no voluntary credits. And this is just prone to challenges and fraud, even some would say. And I think I understand some of those positions. But I also know that there are companies out there, and Sam described why for Bain it's really important to consider investing in carbon credits and going above and beyond simply the decarbonization. And so the counterfactual to a world where there is no carbon credits also, takes out a huge amount of demand from companies who can and are willing to, for various reasons, to invest along the way in their journey to net zero. And that's a very significant cost for us for the journey to net zero. It's also, I think, really important. Probably all of us here and listening online are sitting in financial centers in London or New York or other places in the world. But I think it's also really important to understand the perspective on the other side of these carbon credits, and what these dollar cash flows mean on the ground in places that are working to conserve standing nature or invest in communities, and the criticality of looking from that perspective up as well as from the financial community down, if I can say it that way. So that controversy of, well, wait a minute, there are some reasons to question the integrity. So is there going to be demand, or are people going to pull back from the demand? I think does make it more challenging for investors to invest. And I think then on a positive note, we are finding ways. There are people who are acting with high integrity, who are entering into long-term offtake agreements for carbon credits and are helping to kind of look through those challenges. But this is a critical moment to keep stepping up clarity around quality and transparency so that we can get an appropriate amount of investment dollars flowing both on investing in projects and on the offtake, if you will, of high quality carbon credits.
And I mean,
Sorry.
build on what Bill was saying. I mean, or Hans was saying, I think there's really three reasons I hear when I talk to peers at other companies who are thinking about these types of investments. The first of these is, Hans covered a little bit, which is lack of transparency, right? There's a real information asymmetry in the market, and investors just can't get to the data that they're used to getting. When they think about financial investments, you can't really get that for these types of projects yet, because there hasn't been a requirement to be as transparent as they would like. The second area is really that there's not a well understood, disciplined, structured pricing model, right? And so it's hard to figure out what you should pay. And that partially built off the fact that there's not enough information, but it's also just how do you price a carbon credit? And that's something that I think we need to continue to work on. But it's market prices are going to clear, and I agree with the comments earlier about that from Anton. As we do get more high integrity credits, I think the market will start to clear at a higher level for those credits that you can have confidence in. And so I think there is a pricing challenge in the market. And then last is the lack of resources. I'm fortunate that I work for a company that is willing to invest to build the team and the expertise to do the level of diligence we need to do in our sourcing process. Not every company can do that. And so where do they turn for, to get that kind of information? And I think that's where, the VCMI framework is really going to be a help, because, once you have a CCP approved credit, they can start to trust that that diligence has actually been done. They may not have to do it themselves, but they can buy with more confidence. So I think those are the three big reasons I hear.
Thanks, Sam. That's very helpful. And whilst you have the floor, there's also another question here for you. And you touched a bit on this a bit in your opening section, but could you talk a bit more about how you support your clients through investments to reduce their emissions? So is there a way that you support them with what you're saying there about the uncertainty, and what is a high integrity credit? Could you talk a bit more about the work that you do in that space?
Yeah, so we do work with clients on helping them with their overall sustainability strategy. This is part of typically it comes up as part of what's the correct operating model to put in place? And, what's the process and how you think about these types of credits? We don't make specific recommendations on projects to clients. There are a number of clients that actually look at our public disclosures. We do have the California disclosures on our website that talk about the investments we make every year. And, there are clients that look there, and those are the ones in which we've chosen to invest. But we don't make specific recommendations. Rather, we'll talk about, what are the resources you need? What are the approaches you use? We're very open about the process we use for sourcing and how we go about the diligence and how we built that capability up so that they can do it themselves. But it needs to be part of it. Typically, it's part of a broader sustainability strategy project that we're doing with a given company.
Thanks, Sam. That's really helpful. And there's a few questions in here about the panel's attitude to offsetting Scope 3 emissions, particularly in reference to the recent SBTi statement that's been released. In what ways can ICVCM CCPs contribute to ensuring the environmental integrity of EACs, so environmental attribute certificates used for Scope 3 abatement? I will turn to Anton first, but it'd be interesting to hear from the panel as well on this issue of Scope 3 emissions.
Yeah, I mean, I would also be really interested to hear what others have to say on this, but really broadly, we are in this end-to-end integrity ecosystem together with these organizations and these institutions. This is the time, because we're talking about integrity, but it's really about the full chain, right, of integrity, and making sure that we have all of these elements in place on supply, demand, target setting, measurement, and in the different elements of carbon credits life cycle as well, from generation to the transactions and all the way to end use and claims that are being made. And there are others here that are better placed to talk about this than I am. So maybe I'll pass on to others. I would really be a little interested to hear what others have to say. But I really think that it's important for us to all work together on this and have a holistic view of integrity and bringing it on all fronts. Thanks.
And Rafaela, very interested to hear your views on this from the claim side as well.
Yes, sure. So first on the SBTI's statement, just wanted to say that from a VCMI standpoint, we welcome this as a signal to companies that they can and should be engaging with carbon markets. Of course, as we have been talking about integrity here, that will be paramount. What we know is that companies are not reducing emissions fast enough, and we need all the tools to make progress on ambitious climate targets. We know that about 60% of companies with a science-based target are falling behind on Scope 3 reduction targets from different reports that have been released. And so our position is that action is definitely better than inaction. And so if we can build a tool with integrity to incentivize more action for companies to invest now in carbon credits with integrity, we definitely welcome that. We are working on a Scope 3 flexibility claim at the moment that was released in beta version. Meaning that we are still consulting and running stakeholder consultations on this beta version. But we believe that this claim will also support and increase urgent climate action while companies transition to net zero. Of course, a key element of this Scope 3 flexibility claim we're working on are the guardrails, right? We want to make sure that the right guardrails are in place to maintain integrity, and also ensure that carbon credits are used in addition and not to delay any decarbonization. So this shouldn't be and must not be a get out of jail card, of course. It has to be done right, and that's why we are taking the time to further consult on that. But it's a way of recognizing that companies are facing challenges, and we want to make sure that this is addressed. And as I mentioned earlier, that we really incentivize more action than just inaction.
Hans, you touched on this as well. Yeah, do you want to come in on this?
Well, I think great interventions. I was going to add one thought, which is, well, two thoughts actually. One is, it's great to hear this question. This is right in the heart of the controversy. How does it work? How do you combine integrity and the opportunity to do more? And so I certainly don't have the answers, but I think it's really critical that we have standard setters like VCMI, ICVCM working on this. And we really would love to see SBTI also weigh in on this. This is an important topic. And the one additional thought that I would say is there may be things like time-bound periods of usage. You know, if this is about a journey rather than a destination. Sam made the point earlier that we can't wait to the end to start doing what we all can. And so, you know, there's questions about how much of Scope 3 might be applicable. There's questions as to what level of quality would qualify as helping. There may be questions of time as well. What level of time is appropriate? And so just to add that to the debate, but this is the critical moment for us all to find a way to do this.
Sam, are you hearing much about this from your side on in your investments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, first off, we were really pleased to hear some of the progress that SBTI is making in their announcements around this. And we trust that they're going to find the right balance to make sure that, you know, there's integrity of kind of corporate climate action, while at the same time giving credit to companies for kind of providing finance for a number of these types of investments. It is something that's coming up. You know, we're in one of those challenges, right? I'll use us as an example. You know, our largest emissions category is air travel. And, you know, by far, you know, 98.5% of our carbon footprint is scope 3. And of that, 60% is air travel. So, you know, that's really the one that we care a lot about. We can't do anything really to go flip a switch and decarbonize the aviation industry, right? So even though we have the will, it's going to take time. And that's why we say, look, let's measure it accurately as we can. Let's get better about that type of reporting. And then let's make investments in things like sustainable aviation fuels, some of the tech-based carbon removals, and even the nature-based projects around things like, for us, it's, you know, reforestation, ARR, a little bit of IFM work as well. And so, you know, we take that kind of an approach to it because we can make those investments today to take carbon out of the atmosphere, minimizes our impact while we make the transition. And then we support our clients. I mean, the biggest impact Bain & Company can ever have on the environment is actually helping our clients decarbonize. And that's why we have such a heavy kind of emphasis on doing work with clients in those areas. We'll help the aviation industry, you know, our clients there, but it's going to take time.
We hear that a lot from companies that we talk to as well, that it's a challenge of we need urgent action now, but how can you decarbonize, especially on scope 3 emissions that you might not have control over? How can you do that overnight? And how can you try and make sure that you're, like you're saying about the uncertainty about high integrity credits, how can you use that as part of your journey towards decarbonisation? We have quite a few questions in the chat about CCP-labelled credits, Anton. So I will just group them all together. So we have a question around, actually, let's start with Sam. Do you think that the CCP label is going to bring in new corporate demand? And what do you think about paying a price premium for CCP labelled credits? So you kind of touched on this earlier, but do you think there's going to be new corporate demand for credits as a result of the CCP label?
Yeah, I do think so. It's going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. But there are a lot of companies who would like to make these kinds of investments. But like I said before, they're struggling because of some of the market challenges to actually make the investments confidently and be able to make the case to their executive teams about these types of investments. And so I think, you know, as you start to get CCP label credits, people start implementing the VCMI frameworks, you are going to have more confidence in what you're buying. And that's going to allow some of this currently unspent demand. It'll kind of unlock it and allow it to come into the market. And I think given the supply demand imbalance on some of these as well, that increased demand is going to drive up prices for those credits. So I do think there will be a price premium that happens for CCP level credits. And I think that's something that, you know, we should applaud. It's because with transparency, I also think the price goes up, which puts the investment that many of these projects will need to actually be successful. Right. When they're commodities, you end up at kind of low cost, you know, this is not July wheat. And so you're really, you know, you need more in there around innovation and things that the project developers are investing in to make these successful. And so you're going to need a higher price premium.
Thank you. Very quickly, Anton, I'm going to bombard you with the final questions, and I'd be very interested just to hear from the panel quick final reflections. So Anton, will avoidance credits be eligible for CCP label, particularly from projects coming from Indian subcontinent? Then linked to that, how can guidelines for high quality carbon credits, how can they be structured to facilitate redistribution of capital from the global north to the global south? How can they incentivize finance to be channeled towards developing countries? And are there any potential challenges or risks associated with CCP credits creating liquidity for investors? So I'll turn to Anton first, but then grateful to get final reflections from the panel before we wrap up.
Yeah, so I'll try to take them. So avoidance, well, there's a whole, whenever somebody from our world hears the words avoidance, there's so many questions like what is it actually meant? But I think if it's avoided deforestation and RED projects, so there are a number of methodologies that have been submitted to assessment on those types of projects, including some new jurisdictional approaches, and I wouldn't want to prejudge anything, but as long as it is up to par with the assessment framework that we have come up with, then those credits can be CCP eligible. But I would never, at this point, be as bold as to prejudge anything of that. Just please follow the decision-making process that is coming out. Is going to be every month from now on until at least autumn. So and specifically sort of linking the question of the dipsec continent and global south, well, that is one of the reasons why we are doing this. We believe this is a way to incentivize and increase private finance flows into the developing world. And it's as simple as looking at the portfolio of the programs that are now CCP eligible, and this gives an indication of what of the destinations of the private finance that we expect to flow into these countries once the labels arrive to the market. And on liquidity, well, really, trust's about trust and confidence in these credits, and whether that the market impacts of that might be, and really think that trust is key here. This is what we're trying to bring to the market, and hopefully this will help the market develop and eventually grow and eventually achieve the scale that we need to get to the targets we're all setting. Thanks.
Thanks, Anton. Jasna, any final reflections?
I mean, just to say, since we're nearly at time, thanks again, ICVCM, for the opportunity to participate, and all the panelists. I thought, yeah, this was a really interesting and much needed discussion. We'll continue monitoring how corporate transparency on the use of carbon credits evolves, but it'll be interesting to see how, given all the work done by VCMI and ICVCM, how the voluntary carbon markets evolve over the coming years. So definitely a space to watch. Thanks.
Thanks. Hans.
Thank you, Lorna. Echoing thanks for the panel, all the questions. Really just my reflections. A just transition to net zero is not easy. There's a lot of nuance. We need to be quite clear-eyed about what carbon markets can do for us. There's a lot, but what they can't. And we really feel that the role for standard setters like ICVCM, VCMI, and indeed SBTI is a really critical one at this moment. We look forward to continuing the work together.
Thanks, Hans. Rafaela.
Yes, thank you very much, Lorna. Yes, I would conclude with a call to action after this great panel today. Really, we have the frameworks in place now to provide the trust and confidence that is needed to scale up VCMs and to make sure that we catalyze finance where it's really needed the most. So we also have the framework to make sure that we provide companies the confidence to take action and communicate about their climate leadership, and at the same time being better prepared for the growing regulatory landscape. So a call to action for companies here and investors to ask more for companies to follow these frameworks and companies to take action now, because the frameworks are here and ready to be used. And we can't wait to see more companies demonstrating climate leadership. Yeah, I wish to conclude also to saying thank you so much again for the panel and for all the questions today. Thanks.
Thanks. And Sam, very quickly.
Yes,
sorry to get you last.
Echo everyone else. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for having me. And we hope that kind of our story inspires many of you out there to join us in the journey.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone that's joined us. So we will be putting a recording up on the website, and do reach out if you've got any other questions. If we didn't get to your questions, we can put you in touch with the right people, and also share links if you're interested to hear more about the work that we're doing. So thank you all for joining us today. Have a good evening.